Hello and welcome to the King Street Cinema podcast. My name is Andy, and for the next hour or so we'll be talking about movies, mainly movies that will be shown at the King Street Cinema in Ipswich. We're mainly focusing this episode on Repo Man, the 1984 classic that will be shown as part of VHS Fridays. That's the last Friday of every month, so that will be on the last Friday of October at King Street. Movie critic Barnaby Page will be chatting with me about that movie in great detail. That'll be coming up first on the show. I'll also be catching up with Dan, the MD of the cinema, updating us on everything that's going on there in this month and last month. And James from the cinema will be chatting with me about David Cronenberg, as his new movie, The Much Anticipated Crimes of the Future, will be shown there very soon. We sort of chatted about that, but neither have seen it. We're both looking forward to watching it, so that's something I'm very much looking forward to. And also, if you hang about at the end of the show, I did catch up with one of the customers, Richard, who saw Rambo, the first of the VHS Fridays. I just got his opinion on that. And yeah, so I put that on the end. I'm going to hopefully be about the cinema more with my little dictaphone and trying to speak to some people if they want to about movies. I do like talking about movies, and that's what we do on this. So this is the conversation with Barnaby about Repo Man.
Meet Otto. He's a green-cut kid in a dirty business. He repossesses cars. He's a repo man.
You gonna give me my car back, or do I gotta go to your house and shove your dog's head down the toilet?
His mission is to repossess a '64 Chevy, but hidden within its trunk
What you got in the trunk?
You don't want to look in there.
is the most important discovery in the history of our planet. Repo Man. It's a mystery.
Suppose you're thinking about a plate of shrimp. Suddenly somebody will say like plate or shrimp or plate of shrimp out of the blue, no explanation.
It's a comedy. It's a chase. It's the forces of law
Marlene, I'm on my coffee break.
against the representatives of discontented youth, against the finest minds in government.
I had a lobotomy in the end.
Lobotomy? Isn't that for loonies?
Not at all.
And they're all in pursuit of a '64 Chevy Malibu from who knows where.
Eyes melt, skin explodes, everybody dead.
Repo Man. The story of the ultimate repossession. Repo Man. Not just a job, it's an adventure.
I'm here with Barnaby Page. Thanks for joining us. First time on the King Street Cinema podcast.
It is absolutely, Andy.
Do you use King Street a lot, actually? That's one thing
I don't use King Street as much as I should. And, as somebody who used to be very involved with the Electric Palace in Harwich, which is, of course, one of the closer equivalents of King Street, I should be there every week. Unfortunately, I don't keep it quite as busy as you do, Andy.
But you do use this.
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely.
And just quickly, can you think of the last film you saw there? This was
I have to say, it'd probably be pre-pandemic was the last time I was there. But I know there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in programming at King Street at the moment. So we unfortunately couldn't make the film tonight we were planning to go to, could we? Because of the time taken to do these podcasts. But we'll have to make a date to go to one soon.
That's really good point. But I will point out as well that you don't actually live in Ipswich, so it's not as easy.
Well, no, absolutely no.
So do you just want to introduce yourself to?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm Barnaby Page. And among other things in life, I'm a film critic. I write, a couple hundred reviews a year, I guess, for a website called Frame Rated of old films and new films. Sort of among my bigger interests, the kind of cinema of the sort of 60s and 70s. But among other things, I have the very special feature of having turned 18 at more or less exactly the time Repo Man was released, and therefore having seen it in the cinema when it came out. which is not something a lot of people did at that point, because it wasn't a huge commercial success. I've since saw it again, I think in the 1990s, probably on VHS, I can't remember, and then the last couple of days I've been rewatching it courtesy of Amazon. So my Repo Man history is kind of a history of the development of film distribution over the last 35 years.
Yeah. So what were your thoughts at the time when you initially saw it?
I remember, that's interesting. I remember really, really liking it. In fact, I think I went to see it 2 or 3 times, probably close in succession, day after day, as I did at the time with films I liked. I remember thinking that it was really, quite hard, quite tough, quite edgy. That's probably something we don't so much feel these days. But, I think that goes inevitably with the territory of, older movies, because things become softened when we start to see them as more nostalgic rather than current.
Yeah. Were you into the punk scene at the time, which this film's very...
I wasn't personally at all. I was probably as far from a punk as you could be, but I had a lot of friends who were, and I was well aware of it. I'd grown up I was actually living in Canada at the time of Repo Man, but I'd grown up in England sort of from the late 70s, early 80s. So, yeah, I was very aware of punk. I probably didn't really pick up on the subtleties of the differences between British punk and California punk, which of course you can see in Repo Man. It's, to be honest, it's a little bit of a kind of glossed up and watered down version.
Yeah, which I suppose if you look at the movies of the time, there wasn't a lot of punk in them, especially a film that would have got a cinema release. So this might have been a lot of people's introduction to punk.
I think it quite possibly was. Yeah, that's an interesting point. And I think as well I think in the Americas certainly, the punk movement didn't have quite the prominence in the media in general that it did in the UK. It was a big thing in England. It was more niche there. So certainly I suspect a lot of North American audiences, that might have been quite a novelty, seeing those scenes in Repo Man. Particularly early on, early on where the Emilio Estevez character has just left his job in the supermarket where he works. You think it might become a bit of a sort of falling down scenario that he's going to go out, and show the world what he thinks of it. But instead he goes and hooks up with his punk friends. His maybe slightly well-behaved punk friends, one of whom is his Duke, played by Dick Rude. Later says, we should do something really bad. We should go and commit some crimes. Let's go get sushi and not pay. And that's that's very much, I think, the 1984 LA take on punk, I suspect.
Yeah. And that's something you picked up on there. There's a lot of humour in this film.
Absolutely,
it's it's one of those... I'd see it as a comedy. I laughed quite a lot when I watched it again last night. But it's not really remembered as that. It's sort of the poster of the very hard-looking Emilio Estevez.
Yeah.
And it was only a year later, I believe, that he'd done The Breakfast Club. And
about that time, yeah.
Yeah, and he's more like the Judd Nelson character in Breakfast Club in this, opposed to the jock. But for many people, this would have been their first introduction to him, who is a big 80s icon.
Indeed, yeah. And I think you're right. I think it's very much a comedy. That really struck me in rewatching it. I'd forgotten that. If somebody had asked me, 2 months ago, describe Repo Man without looking it up, I would have said, it's this kind of, noirish crime thriller about a guy who repossesses cars,
Yeah.
But it's so comic. It's so broadly comic. I mean, the film it oddly reminded me of at times is almost kind of Mars Attacks.
Yeah.
But it's almost absurd comedy.
Yeah. I mean, without going too much in the plot, because people should come and see this in the cinema. It's one... I've got the Blu-ray, which I don't think is available anymore. I think it was like a limited edition. I saw it on TV as a kid, and it's part of this VHS Fridays. So many people rented it, and that's why it's remembered, because it didn't do very well at the box office. It's one that I really want to see on the big screen. It's got that sci-fi element, which is what I actually remembered. I must have gone, before I bought the Blu-ray, it was at least a decade before I saw this, and I remembered it as being mainly sci-fi, when it isn't. That's a smaller part of it.
Interesting how the memories are so different, because I remembered it as being mainly another genre.
Exactly,
yeah.
So maybe it's what you're more into when you watch it.
Sure.
But it's certainly a really interesting film, and it is one of those... I can't think of much else like it. So it's very difficult for me not to give away much of the plot.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's part crime, it's almost part buddy movie.
Yeah, that very much occurred to me as well.
With the older and younger Repo Man.
Yeah.
Great performances, I think.
Terrific performances. You know, as you said, I think, you know, Estevez. He's very good in this. He's not a likable character, but he's a really believably sullen one. You know, a lot of the smaller parts are great, but I think the real standout is Harry Dean Stanton, you know, who plays the older Repo Man. And the film reminded me, pardon me, somewhat of Paris, Texas, which of course Stanton was also in, came out the same year.
Yeah.
You know, it's very, very slightly similar theme. You know, it's a road trip with a man and a boy. Stanton says at some point in near the beginning of Repo Man that you need a code to live by. You know, and he's kind of doing the same thing in Paris, Texas, trying to demonstrate or to indeed to discover a code. Now, I don't for a moment suggest there's any influence going either way between the two films, but I thought that was an interesting coincidence, and you know, I think his part has a kind of depth and resonance that really probably every other part in Repo Man doesn't have to that extent.
Yeah, I mean, to me, he's a support role in this, but one thing I picked up on beginning credits, his name's first.
Yeah. Well, he was a name, you know.
I mean, I sort of know him in his later career as his character actor, but Paris, Texas, he was the star of.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, it's a film I had never seen until King Street showed it a few weeks ago. And what an amazing film.
I'd
never seen it.
No.
I love Wings of Desire, the same.
Yeah, well, there's one I wish I'd been to King Street for. I haven't seen Paris, Texas in years.
Yeah,
should revisit that.
It's one of those, and the way it's shot, big screen.
Yeah.
This is made for the big screen. It's one of those so slow but so interesting. I really enjoyed it. But yeah, it's such a contrast to this movie, which is 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Loads happens. But yet you get to know the characters really well, I think, in this. With Estevez, it's that you kind of know he's the punk. He's the which I think when it came out, so many people would feel they could relate to.
Yeah, sure.
And younger audiences now, I mean, I'd recommend if you're. I know I'm from Ipswich. I know lots of Ipswich punks who are younger than me. Maybe they'd feel the same now.
Yeah.
You know. And when I first saw it, I'd have been. I will say I saw it on TV, so I don't think I broke any rules. But I was nowhere near the age of 18 when this came out. I was a lot younger, and it was that I probably watched it because who knows? Because I recognised him from Mighty Ducks.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And I think it is that. In a way, it is a film about youth. He's like getting his first work, isn't he? It's we've all, well, not all, but a lot of us when we're younger, we have these. Working in shops, and that sort of thing, and not to give much away, but at the beginning when he quits his job, a lot of people will be like, "Yeah, I'm in a dead end supermarket job. I want to do that." So yeah, it's that sort of he's known for this teen movie, what came out a year later.
Yeah,
but in a way, this is a teen movie, but a lot darker and a lot weirder.
Yeah, and a lot more of a fantasy. I mean, it's again, you know, not to give things away. It's not a remotely credible film on any level. But you know, it's a film in which a great deal happens. It's very, very kinetic. It's very intense. You know, there's constantly something going on. It all ties together really pretty well, which is surprising given how rapidly and how late it changed during production. I mean, just to give two examples. And again, you know, I'll be careful not to give a spoiler here. The MacGuffin in the film was originally going to be a neutron bomb. It then turned out, of course, to be something completely different. The film also, which is, as it stands, is set almost entirely, if not entirely, in Los Angeles, in rather nondescript parts of LA. It was originally going to be more ambitious and depict a road trip, I think, from LA out across the California desert toward New Mexico, which is perhaps one of the reasons why you see New Mexican locations in the maps behind the opening titles. And a lot of those things were changed, according to Alex Cox, in his kind of autobiography. A lot of those things were changed really very, very late in the production process. But I think, you know, despite that, it actually, given its general absurdity, it actually hangs together very well. Everything's kind of logical.
Yeah, so Alex Cox's biography there, have you read it, or did you find out as a quote?
No, I have it, in fact.
You've got it there, yeah.
If this were video, people could see me holding it up to the camera.
Excellent.
It's called X Films by Alex Cox. It goes up to, I think, I'm not sure, the early part of this century. Yeah, published 2008.
Because I know him for this and Sid and Nancy.
Indeed, yeah.
Both. I mean, I'm guessing he was an old punk. Is he English as well?
Yes, I think he is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sid and Nancy was the reason I bought a book. I wrote a piece about Sid and Nancy. Probably last year or maybe year before, and I bought it for the Sid and Nancy chapter. Now I've read the Repo Man chapter as well, so eventually I'll get through the whole thing.
Because this is a film, from the interviews I've seen, he's very proud of.
Yeah.
And probably, even though it bombed at the time, this film is the definition of cult movie, I think.
Absolutely,
It's loved, and I think with good reason. But in the long run, I think it's been helped by not being a big hit when it came out.
Yeah.
Hence, it's not forgotten, and it's sort of snowballed into this thing that people like.
Yeah.
But I just quickly looking before we record this at the other films he's done, he's never really had that hit.
No.
And it looks like he got into quite lowbrow films after.
Yeah.
He'd done a film which he got in trouble with Universal. They tried to stop it, called Repo Chick, which looks like this really sleazy movie. Only about 10 years ago. And they tried to stop him using the name Repo because of the connection, because they were releasing a film called Repo Men. Which,
Indeed, yes.
Which hasn't anything to do with it either.
Indeed. I thought at first, I came across that this weekend, and I thought at first glance, no, it's a sequel. What a disaster to have made a sequel to Repo Man.
Yeah.
Because some films just don't need sequels or remakes. And you're right, it actually has nothing to do with it.
No.
Though one suspects the title is not entirely coincidental.
Well, his theory on this is they had this film that wasn't very good. They didn't know what to do with it, so it was almost branded to look like a sequel. Yeah. Because of the cult following. And I remember seeing that Repo Men in the cinema. And what's this? I thought it was going to be a sequel.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. But like you say, this film, I think it's unique. I'm so glad there wasn't a proper sequel or a remake. It wouldn't work now. And why make a film set in the 80s what's already been made in the 80s?
Indeed, yeah.
In the world we live in, it wouldn't work. But it is one of those films where it is 1984. A different take on it to a lot of films. But it does feel iconic in 80s. Yeah,
it belongs thoroughly to its time and its place. I think that's right. And a great deal of it as well. A lot of the little detailed things like the character commenting that you always find air fresheners in repossessed cars, countless things, little things like that, are all based on Cox's own friendships with actual people working in the auto repossession world.
Did he not work himself in that for a while?
I don't know that he did, but he had a close friend who did. I think he maybe did briefly, but a lot of it was based on stories he was told, including other things I won't go into for the sake of refraining from spoilers. But yeah, there's an absolute authenticity to the film in that sense, which is kind of bizarre when you're talking about a film which is so deeply implausible in its plot.
Yeah.
But as you say, it couldn't be set at any other time, and it couldn't, I think, really be set in any other place. I can't imagine Repo Man in New York. Certainly can't imagine Repo Man in London. It would be more of a sort of, Guy Ritchie movie than an Alex Cox movie.
Yeah, well, back then you'd have had Michael Caine.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
And it's very... from someone who grew up liking, for me, then older punk music, it is that kind of... you connect it with something. And I'd forgotten that, like, Iggy Pop done the theme.
Yep.
And Iggy Pop in that stage of his career would have probably been a little bit on the down. So maybe because it was low budget, they got him in, and it was.
Yeah.
It seems like it's like one of these films up and coming. They've got the one star, hence his name's.
Yeah.
It's a passion project. It's the word
yeah,
I'm looking
absolutely.
for.
Yeah.
And the fact that they still love it and very proud of it, and it's still being shown at the cinemas, is something quite unique and nice. I mean, a lot of the VHS season, I mean, so far we've had Rambo, or First Blood, sorry, and Predator, two films that were absolutely huge on VHS, but were still big hits at the cinema. Whereas this one, I think it's so few people saw it at the cinema. You're one of the lucky few. That this is the time to go and see it. And sometimes you can see a film on the big screen and you just get so much more out of it. If you've a lot of people I've spoken to, and I always go and see old films. Even pre me going to King Street, I'd go and see them at other cinemas, and I still do cinemas. I'm not going to lie. People are like, well, why do you want to see that? It's on telly every week. Firstly, Repo Man isn't anymore.
Yeah.
Which it was a lot when I was young, but I can't remember the last time seeing it anywhere. I don't think it's on streaming at the moment. But I've seen films I've watched hundreds of times, like Indiana Jones. I saw the third one when it came out, but I never saw the first two. I've seen both of them on the big screen and just got so much more out of it. And a film like this, that you don't get a chance to see on the big screen much.
No, absolutely you don't. Those, and very often actually it's those movies, I think, that they kind of fall into a gap. They're not recent movies, but they're not clearly well established classics. They're not Casablanca, Gone with the Wind, Kane, etc. It's often those movies that are really, really difficult to find. And I think in programming those in art house cinema is doing something really useful. Because they're the ones that generally you are stuck watching on DVD or, these days hoping you can find them on Amazon or whatever, which is certainly better than nothing, but these films, they were made for the big screen. There was never, television might have been in the back of people's minds, but it was still no more than in the back of people's minds at that point in terms of filmmaking. It's the way they're intended to be seen. And Repo Man is a big screen film. It's it's an action film. It's not a sitting around talking film. It's a film where stuff happens and people drive cars and things explode and etc. etc.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because, like I say, it's known for this VHS, hence it's in this season.
Yeah.
But when you think about it, it might not have even got a video release. The fact that it didn't do that well at all, and it could have been forgotten. So yeah, we're very lucky. A lot of it might actually, I don't think Alex Cox would admit this, but a lot of it might be the fact that for those few years after Emilio Estevez got to be so big,
indeed, yeah,
that people went back to it. Like I say, Breakfast Club was a massive hit. He was in Almost Fire around the same time.
Yeah.
And then even later on, I mentioned it kind of jokingly, but the Mighty Ducks films were big, big kids films, and Young Guns, loads when you think about it. So it could be the Brat Pack which saved this film.
Yeah, it could be. It's sort of retroactively, yeah. And I think it's a film that I could oddly say in a way that it's a perfect film, and by perfect I don't necessarily mean it's a 10 out of 10 movie. I certainly don't mean that it's one of the great all-time movies. But it's a perfect film, and that it's very difficult to find anything that's really wrong with it. Once you accept its aspirations are relatively low, its budget is relatively low, it's not trying to be thematically profound, though maybe, like a lot of movies, it is a bit more than it shows on the surface. There's really nothing in Repo Man that doesn't work by its own definition. We were just discussing another film from that year, weren't we, Supergirl, where it's very easy to pick out things that didn't work. But in Repo Man, Cox, amazingly, given the fact that it seems to have been, pretty much a seat-of-the-pants production in a lot of ways, pulls it all off, I think, really, really well. And everything is successful. Yeah.
I think some people might have criticised it, especially back then. Do you think it was a bit too out there for some people? A bit too, not, beginning, middle and end, so to speak?
It's not The Breakfast Club, for sure. I guess it was never going to be one of the big movies of the year for that reason. It was always going to go to that in the broadest possible sense kind of punk audience. Now, I don't just mean people who are into punk music. I mean people who sort of appreciated that whole sort of aesthetic, as it were. But yeah, I don't think it lacks in that respect at all.
No. Okay. Yeah,
and I actually think the end, again, not to give a great deal away, I think the end works really interestingly. I don't know if you're aware, the English critic David Thompson has written a book where he kind of follows up the stories of movie characters, and fantasises about what happened to them after the film, or indeed I think sometimes what might have happened to them before the film. And I've thought Repo Man would be, rewatching it the other night, I thought Repo Man would be a perfect candidate for that. I'd love to know what happens to the some of the lead characters next and what they're doing now.
Yeah, but it is one of those that that ending works as a film, because like we said before, there could have been a terrible sequel.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's a way like a lot of, say, Tarantino films. The characters work in that story.
Yeah.
And they could Yeah, there could have been spin-off films and they'd have been
yeah,
terrible.
and it wouldn't benefit from, in a sense, it wouldn't benefit from a great deal more explanation or a great deal more sophistication. It is, a little bit crude at the edges, but not in a bad way. And a very, very slick Repo Man made on 20 times the budget, I think would probably be a lesser film.
Yeah, definitely.
It'd be a pretty dumb car chase movie, essentially.
Yeah. It's like I said before recording, it reminds me, bits of it, because of that roughness, remind me of like a trauma movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
But a really, really good one, without so much sleaze and that sort of thing. But bits of it really do remind me of that. But it's a cut above the same sort of era when they were churning Cannon films out, for example. But I think I mentioned Tarantino, and I think this influenced a lot of filmmakers sort of 5-10 years later. It's not one of the obvious influence of, say, Tarantino, but when you get these films of the early 90s, they're a bit edgier, a bit sort of weirder action, without being sort of complete fantasy or complete sci-fi. I think it definitely influenced later filmmakers.
I think so. I think you can certainly see Repo Man perhaps Repo Man specifically, more than other Cox films like Sid and Nancy, in Tarantino. It's not nearly as self-conscious as Tarantino's work is. It's a bit more of a sort of gleeful, throw stuff at the wall and see if it sticks kind of film. It mostly does stick. That's the reason for his success. But yeah, I think you can imagine that in some of the tone of it, the way that there's this often simply bizarre humour, and a lot of it is about very everyday things like there's a running gag, isn't there, about the packaging of food simply being labelled food or so. A lot of that is you can see it has a kind of family resemblance to Tarantino's kind of humour as well, where he loves to insert these little irrelevant mundane things into what otherwise would be big tense scenes. And Repo Man does a lot of that as well. There
is sort of there'll be a lot of dialogue or whatever, and then a silly little joke, which I really like. It's a kind of, for me, it works, and it sort of lightens the tone. Not that it's particularly dark, but this film could be with the plot. And the fact of what they do, and they're not like people. I think you need that humour in it to make it a more watchable film, or a repeat watchable film. Which this, for a lot of people, as I said before, definition of cult film. This is the sort of film you said yourself. You saw it 2 or 3 times in the cinema, and it's that typical. It hasn't got that massive fan base, but those who do love it. And you still see people walking about with Repo Man t-shirts on, for example.
Absolutely, And I think another thing worth mentioning there, and I mean this is moving a little away from discussion of that specific film, but there's a kind of energy to that kind of film which you didn't really experience in terms of audiovisual material at that time. Today you do, because we have YouTube and all these things, and you're constantly seeing, moving pictures that are kind of rough at the edges and not terribly professionally made, and jump from here to there. 35 years ago, isn't it, I guess, now, that we're talking about, getting on for 40. Everything was so much more slicker and so much more packaged, sometimes deadeningly so, and actually, very often deadeningly so in terms of the kind of the big commercial movies of the late 70s and early 80s, particularly the ones aimed more at family audiences, which were obviously the ones I'd seen at that age. And so there's a kind of rawness to this kind of, I don't want to call it guerrilla filmmaking, because it wasn't, but it has that feel, There's a kind of rawness to movies like this that was quite, really, I think, quite a refreshing shock then. Yeah,
and it's not, like, say, the same year a massive hit was Beverly Hills Cop, which really fits into that cop action popular thing at the time. This sort of has... I'm not saying it's something completely fresh, but it's got so many different influences. It kind of makes it feel like its own thing, which, it clearly takes from a lot of things, but in a unique way. And out of, let's say, so far in this VHS Friday films, it's different, and I think hopefully a lot of people will attend all of these and see loads of different films. But if this one isn't your favourite one, it will certainly stand out in some way from what they're showing. because even if you was to do a triple bill of films like Repo Man, I think you'd struggle.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah, I mean, you could. I'm sure you could drag some things out, but I think they probably would not be, indie movies from 1984 either. I think you might have to look at something. I don't know, something like the Blair Witch Project, something quite unexpected. To conjure up again that sense of novelty that Repo Man does. And I think you're right. Nobody who watches Repo Man is going to be unmoved by it. I think a lot of people will love it. A lot of people will laugh at it. A few people will hate it, because it's not, as I say, it's not a sort of nicely packaged, all tied up, high budget movie. But hating something is still a reaction to it, and I think they'll certainly find it interesting.
It's a good way to spend a Friday night, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we'll leave it at that, I think. But thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and I'll be interested to hear how the screening goes.
Yeah, I'll let you know. And also, when you catch something again at King Street, if I get a chance, I'll ask you for some thoughts on whatever film you saw.
Yeah, certainly.
And it's been rebranded since you last went, because it would have been Ipswich Film Fair.
It was, yeah. It was still IFTC at the time, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So it'd be interesting. I think you'll be impressed, if I'm honest.
I'm sure I will be.
Excellent. Well, thanks a lot.
Well, thank you, Andy.
James is with us again.
Hello.
He's let's face it, he is a regular on the show.
I am.
Works at the cinema.
I do.
Yeah, and he greeted. Yes. He greeted.
That's what this podcast's all about, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
You greeted me at the door the other day when I saw the Iron Giant.
Yeah.
Which you showed as part of the kids' films for the summer.
Yeah.
I went along and I'd never seen it before. I'd only seen like a middle scene, probably a decade ago on TV.
Amazing.
I really, really enjoyed it.
It's great.
And
classic.
And it was busy, and I have to say, for a screen full of kids, they were really well behaved.
Yeah.
I brought a mate along who'd never been to the cinema before. He really enjoyed it. It was nice, and I've got to be honest. When I got home, I ordered the Blu-ray so I could be a nerd and listen to the commentary and stuff. And really enjoyed it. And are you a fan of that film?
I am indeed.
Yeah.
That's one of those animated movies that I say, top notch.
Yeah. Workday came out when I was about 18, so I think I was in that funny age of I thought I was too old for it.
Yeah, I didn't see it when it directly came out. I saw it a few years later.
Yeah.
Loved it though.
But really enjoyable. I also saw The Secrets of Nim.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed that as well. That's one I actually watched in primary school when they wheeled the video.
Oh, yeah.
And I hadn't seen it since.
Yeah, I saw it as a kid. I can't remember the first time, but fairly young, like 6 or 7 years old. Yeah. So yeah, it's again one of those because I selected the movies for the animated films for the summer. That was one that was always in my head. I really want to show that movie because that's one of the ones I remember very very strongly as a kid, having quite a profound effect on me. So enjoying it very much, but also being a little scared of it as well as a kid. Yeah,
which is that era of 80s kids films. You had that. Really enjoyed it. I really hope that there's more for the next sort of holiday seasons.
Yeah,
and
will be.
Excellent, and we'll chat about that in further episodes, hopefully. But we've got you here to talk about David Cronenberg, really, because you're going to be showing Crimes of the Future.
Yes, his new one. Yeah. I believe first in, I think, 8 years, maybe?
It's
something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite excited about this.
Me too.
The last one I actually remember getting a big release, what I'd call a Cronenberg style film, was probably Existenz, is it called?
Now
he's done films since.
Now that's true in the sense, like you say, in the classic sci-fi body horror terms. Absolutely, Existenz was the last one till this one. This one is very much that kind of thing. So if you're into that kind of thing, I mean, you can tell from the trailers anyway. If you've seen them, then definitely you'll want to see this film.
Yeah, I'm quite excited, and it's been out in America quite a while, and the feedback has been basically, if you like Cronenberg, you're going to like it.
Yeah, that's what I hear. That's what you can tell, really. like I say, from the trailer is that this is a classic Cronenberg written all over it.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
And it's Kristen Stewart as well.
Yeah,
who I think she's over the it's her from Twilight.
Yeah,
really good
you would have
performances.
thought so by now.
Yeah, I mean, and the stigma's kind of gone, and it's okay to say she's a good actress, especially after Spencer a few years ago. Last year?
Yeah.
It's good to see her in this kind of movie. She's a big Hollywood star, but she's not really that one with the name above the title.
Yeah.
And she has done some interesting roles, and I'm
Absolutely
looking forward to seeing her in this.
Yeah. No, I'm sure she's going to be great. So Viggo Mortensen as well, starring in the starring role, I think, the main character.
Yeah.
Who has appeared in some of Cronenberg's more recent films. So nice to see him back as well. Working with Cronenberg, because I enjoyed his. He did, I think, Eastern Promises.
That was the one. Yeah.
And History of Violence, which both I enjoyed very much. Different to, say, like the old classic Cronenberg films, not sort of body horror science fiction films, but still very intense, very clinical, and very Cronenberg. So if you haven't seen those, watch those.
Yeah, they're the
films.
last two I can remember being. I think I did see both of them at the cinema.
Yeah.
And then he's had at least one film since.
He's had two since then, I think. So he had Cosmopolis, which starred Robert Pattinson, going back to Twilight, who is fantastic in it, by the way. I really like the film. Didn't do very well, sadly, but I'm a big fan of that one. And big fan of Robert Pattinson, by the way. I think he's a great actor. And then Map to the Stars, which was a satire on Hollywood. Hollywood actors and people in the industry specifically, and it's a very dark comedy. It's that's a very strange film, but I really enjoyed it. But that one really freaked people out. Yeah, it did. No, seriously, people were just like, don't get it, don't understand.
Yeah. So I mean, he's had a great career really, and even as an actor as well. He pops up in horror films.
What was he in?
He was in
Nightbreed.
Yeah, the Clive Barker one.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
He's great
in that.
But for me, it was growing up. The first film I remember, and I still really like it, is The Fly.
Brilliant. It's definitely one of his best.
Yeah.
It's generally up there as well as one of the sort of, in your top horror movies. It generally pops up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In lists and stuff.
And it's one of those 1980s remakes of a 50s B movie.
Yes.
Which with the Thing and even Little Shop of Horrors.
Yeah.
They were great.
They were.
And the effects in this movie really stand up.
Oh, fantastic.
The practical effects great. And would you say it's the film that kind of pushed Jeff Goldblum to that bigger stardom?
Certainly. It's the film that people would have gone, oh, that guy's interesting. Like, truly, like, that guy's really versatile and can do, can play layered character, right? So he's not just, I don't know, the funny guy or the sort of soppy guy or whatever. He can do many emotions in one character. Like there's if you haven't seen The Fly, there's a huge, not just physical, but also emotional evolvement within the character through the film, which it truly is a love story, like a tragic love story, really.
Yeah.
And it is really heartbreaking. Yeah. And he's amazing in it. He's just absolutely brilliant in it.
For me, he's one of the few actors who... The one characteristic I hate in people is arrogance, right? But he can play a likeable, arrogant character.
Yeah.
You especially see that in Jurassic Park later on.
Yeah.
Which is great. I mean, the only other actor I think can do it, but it's more to a comic effect, is Steve Martin.
Sure.
But Jeff Goldblum, he did that. That's the film. When I think of Jeff Goldblum, I do think of The Fly over Jurassic Park and Independence Day.
Well, certainly, no. It's his. Would definitely. It's got to be his best role.
Yeah,
certainly. It's certainly his strongest role. Yeah.
And just going back to Cronenberg, what other films are you a fan of?
Right. Okay. So I could never really say for certain what my favourite one is, but certainly of his earlier work, so pre The Fly, Videodrome is just. I've seen that so many times, and throughout, at this point, many different decades. I love going back to it and watching it again, and I still love it.
Yeah.
I still absolutely love it. I think it's one of the most well put together, timed horror movies, because that's timing in horror is the thing, is the key. how to space out what happens, the events. I mean, that's truly the really important thing in any movie, but especially in a horror movie, where you want to keep your audience on the edge of their seat, like what's going on, what's happening. You want to keep the dread and the fear up, but you also want to tell a story that is interesting and intriguing, and it's really well done. But Cronenberg's like that because he's a smart guy, he's a clever guy, and it is maybe not for everyone, but for me personally, he's certainly one of my favourite directors of that type of movie because of the intelligence that he brings and the clinicalness he brings to these very wacky, very absurd stories, which are generally about us, like our inner desires and a lot of the things that we like to hide within ourselves as well, that are just, like, brought out onto the screen. Massive fan, like really big fan.
He does in a lot of his films that the scariest thing is humanity, isn't it?
Yes.
And
well, that's why he made the body horror. He would never say they're horror, though. He describes them more as, or at least when we're talking about the grotesque, he sees them more like as beautiful. Like his stories are more sort of just human stories, and a lot of the horror is in a way beauty. He's a bit of a strange guy like that. But,
I will mention as well that he started to make his short films before. What was his first sort of biggish?
Right, so his the feature film that was like his first film was Shivers. Which is a sort of a body horror, a sexual body horror. Again, sexuality is very big in his movies, even though that he is more of a, like say, clinical filmmaker, and a lot of people think without soul almost. It's more about the science than anything else. There is a lot to do with sexuality and sexual desire within his movies, and Shivers is especially like that's like the forefront because it's about parasite that makes you just want to have sex all the time.
Then there was it what was the sort of rabies type one?
So that's Rabid, which came next, which was sort of a vampiric story where a woman has sort of needs to feed on people, like on blood, but it's to do with cosmetics. It's about to do surgery because she's been in an accident, and where they do sort of the surgery, cosmetic surgery to fix people up. It's in some kind of way these new procedures they have created this kind of organism inside her that needs to feed on blood, which is under her armpit or something. I remember.
I've got there's like an Arrow special edition Blu-ray. I've got it, but I watched it years ago.
I have seen it a few times. It's not one of my favourite ones of his. I find it a bit sort of long-winded and a bit slow. Like he hadn't got the, like say with Videodrome, he's got the pacing perfectly, and before that he still hadn't quite got it. So with Shivers, which I do enjoy a lot more than I do Rabid, but with Rabid it really was sort of not quite there with the pacing, and so you can find it a little boring and a little bit because of that boredom. You sort of maybe miss bits.
Because there's a few more films in between Videodrome and that, and you can sort of see him develop. Was it The Brood? Was that him?
So there was The Brood in '79 and Scanners in '81. Both of those films show much more maturity and development just in storytelling craft, basically, of making a really well put together movie. Brood's great because it's got Oliver Reed in it, so
and Scanners is probably
got Michael Ironside.
Scanners is the first one, which first sort of, I won't say big, but it spawned a lot of sequels.
I did, didn't it?
Not sequels, but sequels. And he's remembered, and that's a film I watched when I was quite young because of the reference in Wayne's World. The Exploding Head
is a famous. I mean, even then, back when we were kids, it was famous. I mean, now it's a complete meme. But even then, it was. Pre-internet meme days, people knew the Exploding Head scene without even seeing the movie.
Shocking and memorable, and often that's the only thing. It's unfairly, but the only thing people
because
remember
it is a
about
good story. It's interesting again about the inner workings of people, and this one's about mental abilities. So especially some of them carry in that to a certain degree. There's sort of telekinesis and stuff like this. But this is more about trying to the evolution of humanity, which again is something that comes up a lot in his stories, about the fear of evolvement and progression of humanity, where that leads us, where that takes us. and that's a big part, really important part, I think, of his storytelling in general.
Yeah. So the new film's on soon. Check the dates, actually. I'm not 100%, but it's on this month. Crimes of the Future. I was going to say we were going to watch, because he made a short film called Crimes of the Future in the 70s, or was it?
Yeah, it was 1970.
1970.
Came out, yeah.
So we're going to watch that and discuss it, and then talk about something for the new one. But it's nothing to do with it. It's
No,
just the same title.
just have the same title. I looked that up recently. I've seen that one as well. I've seen Crimes of the Future. It's good. But it's from what I can tell. Well, it says, I've read it. It says, but yeah, reading the synopsis for the new film, it's not even nothing to do with it. Yeah,
he just liked that title.
Yeah, just like that title, I guess. Yeah,
that's cool. So I'm definitely going to go and see this. I can't think of the last. They must have been. Was Eastern Promises after History of Violence?
So History of Violence and Eastern Promise.
Yeah.
And then as far as I'm aware, Cosmopolis, and then Map to the Stars, which is certainly that's the last feature film he's made, which I think 2014. I'm not quite sure though,
because I didn't see that, and I don't think many people did.
No,
so for me, as with a lot of people, it'll probably be at least a decade since we've seen a
pretty much
on the big screen.
Yeah, definitely.
And really, really excited.
Yeah.
So you're going to go see it yourself as well as working there.
Oh yeah. Hopefully, I get a chance to just go on one of my days off when we're still showing it. I'll watch it there. Yeah, it'll be good.
Excellent. Well, thanks a lot, and we'll probably see you on the next episode as well. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you very much.
See ya.
Hello, Dan. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, Andy. How are you?
I'm good. Been a month since we last spoke.
It has.
And
time flies.
It does indeed. How's the month been at the cinema?
August has been very good, actually. We've outstripped our admissions from last August already, and we've still got 2 weeks to go. So that's really good. Yeah, it's very encouraging to see this, incremental growth. It's small, but it's good.
That's good. Yeah. Only yesterday, obviously when we recorded this, you'll hear it later. I went to see The Iron Giant, and it was pretty busy. Youngsters enjoying the film, considering the film was over 20 years old. And their parents, I think, possibly enjoying it a little bit more. But it was really good to see it. I've never seen it, and that's one thing I love, seeing the old films on the big screen for the first time, as well as seeing them when you've already seen them, as I mentioned Repo Man earlier, which I'm looking forward to. Talking about, I say kids film, it's not really a kids film, but you've got the animation Where is Anne Frank on the beginning of this month, September. Anticipation of this, you looking forward to seeing it yourself?
I am, yes. I love Harry Folman's Waltz with Bashir, and I think he's a great sort of creative mind. I'm really looking forward to seeing this one.
Yeah, and it's one of the. If I'm perfectly honest, I hadn't seen any hype about it, and I saw the trailer here. I can't think what movie it was before, but it was one of those straight away. When I got out of the film, I was basically googling to see when it's coming out, who's behind it, and I'm quite excited about it. And you've got it on for quite a few days, haven't you?
Yeah, we've got it running for a whole week. We don't open on Mondays, so it won't be playing on the Monday, but from the Friday to the Thursday, all week. We've got a couple of matinees as well. So plenty of opportunity to see it.
Yeah, and it's a 12 certificate, isn't it? So I think it's 12. So
it's PG.
PG, okay.
Yeah.
So anyone can see it, which is good.
Yeah.
But it's animation not necessarily aimed at kids, but I think the imagery of it looks like kids will enjoy it as well.
Yeah, I mean it's very, if you're looking for sort of a comparison, an animated comparison, probably something like Song of the Sea would be something to compare it against. But the kind of storytelling is very different, and it's it's not an adaptation of that time.
No.
There's much more. It's a much broader canvas that kind of grows from that, from what Anne Frank, from the character that Anne Frank created in that diary as well. So yeah,
that's what I'm really looking forward to. And I mentioned the classic animations you're showing. In this month's anime season, you've got, which I still consider the most iconic anime ever made, or manga as I call them, Akira.
Indeed.
Which is when I think anime, I think manga, that's the imagery of that poster comes to mind. And this must be one a lot of people are looking forward to seeing on the big screen, possibly for the first time ever, or the first time in over 30 years.
Indeed. I hope so. I know it received a reissue a couple of years ago, which is, I think, when they did the 4K version, and they reissued it. It was a very small reissue. It wasn't a big thing. So, I'm looking forward to us bringing it here. I'm not sure. There's 30 years worth of programs to trawl through to try and find whether we showed it around that time, but I'm not sure that we did. So even bringing it here for the first time, or bringing it back again, is going to be an exciting prospect. And it is one of those movies that kind of fits in with the VHS thing you do, because so many people would have seen this on video as a kid. That's right.
So, well, not even as a kid, but in the last 30 years, it was probably the first one I saw, and I have seen it on the big screen, but it was about a decade ago. So this is another one I'm going to definitely try to get along to. And I think when I saw it on the big screen, it would have been the terrible dubbed version.
Okay.
Whereas you're showing it in the original Japanese.
We're showing the original Japanese language version. I'm not entirely familiar with the different dubs that have been made over the years, but I know that the original dub was very different to the dub that is available today. So that would be an interesting version to show. But
But I mean, you've got the original how it was intended version.
That's it.
And another classic you're showing is Cleopatra.
That's right.
And is it the epic season? Is that how you're wording it, or is you showing epic films? And
we've got a strand once a month, one Sunday every month. We do a vintage Sunday, and it doesn't necessarily have to be an epic, but the bulk of the series is kind of shaping up to be that way. I can't wait to. I don't think we've ever done that here. I think most cinemas have kind of shied away from doing it. But it's if you're looking for an epic, you don't need to look any further than Cleopatra. I mean, it's a gigantic, sprawling, ridiculous film that is extraordinary. I think it's extraordinary. I first saw it on DVD when Fox reissued. They issued. I think it was the first time it was issued on DVD, and it mesmerised me. And just the idea of the all of the conflict. The set based conflict and there's a lot of stealing going on, people stealing props, and it's got a the making of the film has its own story as well.
And for years it was the most expensive film, and with inflation it still might be the most expensive film. I'm not checked, but and high praise that it was spoofed by the Carry On team. To Carry On Clear, which, joking aside, they didn't. I can't think of any other time they spoofed a specific film. They spoofed genres with the Tarzan and Dick Turbo and things like that, and westerns they spoofed, and Hammer they spoofed. But that's the only Pacific film, which you sort of joke with things like that, but it is high praise to be spoofed.
It is,
And I want to come along. I do work some days, but I want to come because Cleopatra is one I've always caught on TV, and I don't know if I've watched it all the way through at once because it was that Sunday afternoon
bank holiday film with the family.
Yeah.
So I'd have had snoring grandparents and talking brother all the way through it. But it like most films, especially back in the day, it's made for the big screen. So that's one that I'm going to try my best, and I'd recommend people coming on to see, because I've spoken to a few people. I wish I'd recorded it about Lawrence of Arabia you showed, and wow was the response. And I missed the last one because of work as well, but it was a kind of a classic western you showed.
It was Once Upon a Time in the West. Yeah,
which is one of the greatest dad films ever made.
Yes.
Did you get to see that when you were here?
I got to see a little bit. I try to sneak in the back as often as I can. It was great. It was great to see that on the big screen. We are doing. I'm gonna plug a tiny little plug for the Vintage Sundays in January, which I think is January the 2nd or the 1st. I can't remember now. But we're going to be doing the Poseidon Adventure.
Oh wow! Okay.
Which takes place on New Year's Eve. So that's the reason for doing it on that day. But that's going to be great.
That's exciting stuff. And another one that's sort of known for watched on TV, ruined by adverts and family. It'd be nice. And a big screen.
That's the thing. These films are so long. They drop on our ITV. They're going to be like 6 hours long.
yeah. And it'd be nice not to be told to buy something halfway through. And another thing you've got coming up is the 50th anniversary of Tubular Bells.
Yeah,
which we should have spoken about in an earlier episode, but you've got a fair few music documentaries.
We do.
And is this a concert though?
This one is a concert. Yeah. This was filmed over 3 days, and it's sort of a very visual concert as well. There are dancers there and whatnot. So it's a very big production. Marking what is probably the most celebrated and recognised, one of the most celebrated and recognised albums of all time. Very much looking forward to bringing that one. That one's on the 22nd of September.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I've not seen many concerts in the cinema, but it's the sort of thing. I'll be honest. Until I went to one, I was a bit like weary because it's not. You're not there. But it's everybody who's into music watches the video DVDs of concerts. You're there with other people enjoying it, which it's not the same as being there, but it's as close as you're going to get. And you're sat in your comfy seat, and you're not getting rained on or bumped into.
Indeed,
and the sound quality is great.
Yeah, sound will be good, and it will cost you a little bit less as well.
Yes, definitely. That's awesome. And speaking of live events, you've been showing a play recently, and it's been so popular you've had to do more matinee showings of it, and more to come. Do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, when we reopened, we introduced or reintroduced the National Theatre shows. On a very small scale, because I think a lot of cinemas were unsure about how well they were going to do reopening, and it has taken a while for the audiences to come back to the National Theatre shows. But Prima Facie with Jodie Comer has been phenomenal for us and a lot of other cinemas. So we've brought that back week on week. To almost sold out shows. It's in our smaller screen, but it's been a fantastic success, one that all of us need. I think that has rekindled the appetite for audiences for the wider National Theatre calendar. So. Yeah, we've got things like Much Ado About Nothing coming up, Othello, which is in next year. We're doing The Seagull with the actress from Game of Thrones, whose name escapes me now.
Emily Clark.
That's right.
Yeah. She's the third Sarah Connor.
Yes, that's right. She is. So really looking forward to those audiences coming back for those ones.
Yeah, and a lot of them are on the website already, I noticed, so you can. And going by the success of the last one, you might want to book up.
That's right.
Book up early, and that's something else. I mean, like, I'm a big lover of films, and we just mentioned, Tubular Bells and stuff. The big screen isn't just for movies, and it's nice to have that option of you want a night out, and something else is on. Yeah, and that's something that in recent years I think has got bigger nationwide at cinemas, and just really cool to see something else with an audience.
It's very good. It's one of those areas where cinemas have felt a need to diversify in their programming, it's worked consistently. Actually, it's been a very good draw for audiences, and the convenience of being able to see a National Theatre show in your local cinema is you don't have the train fare, then you don't have the higher ticket price, obviously, to get in at the theatre itself. It's good. It's great.
Yeah, and obviously budget's one thing for fans of the theatre, but you can have a night out watching it instead of a day out.
Exactly.
Which is really cool.
Yeah.
I think, if there's anything else you would want to cover before we announce what the next VHS Fridays will be, and what we'll focus the next episode of this podcast on. While we think as we do this, the program isn't out for anything past August yet, is it? So I just wonder if there's anything else we want to speak about coming up in September. We've covered quite a lot.
Yeah, we have. We've covered an awful lot. I think probably we're doing quite a few documentaries in September, and one of my, I love them all, but I think the most beautiful documentary of all of them is Fire of Love, which is. It's about two volcano chasers, I think you'd probably call them, who spent sort of 20 years visiting active volcanoes and filming them. And it's a beautiful, heartfelt documentary about the two of them. So I would, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I would recommend that if there's only one film you can come to in September, come to that one.
Yeah, and that's a fairly new documentary, isn't it?
It is, it's brand new. Out from Dogworth this year.
Excellent, yeah. So that was one that I was on the tube in London and saw loads of posters for, but didn't know what it was. Yeah. And I actually, till I saw on your website, you've got it here, I'd forgotten the name of it, but I remembered the poster.
Yeah, so, that's good, that's marketing.
Yeah. That's awesome. And right, so it will be October's VHS Friday, and I'll be doing focusing mainly next episode on this movie. Do you want to let everyone know what it is?
Yes, October's VHS Fridays will be The Lost Boys.
I'm excited. I am very excited. One of my favourite films ever. If I could edit well, I'd have put a little drum roll in that, but I'm really excited about this, and I don't want to say much more, but it's going to be Halloween weekend, and there's going to be a lot of programming around Halloween themed stuff.
Yeah, we've got a whole weekend chock full of Halloween films, so one of which is on sale already, which we know about, which is the thing.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a really good weekend. We're going to deck the entire cinema out in Halloween. It's going to be dark and moody. And
it's going to look like Herman Munster's front room.
It will.
Excellent. I'm really looking forward to that. Thanks for joining us again this month. And should we catch up next month as well?
Love to.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for everybody who joined me on this podcast, and thanks for listening. We'll be back, as we mentioned, next month, mainly talking about one of my favourite movies, The Lost Boys. We'll also be chatting about some of the other movies that will be shown over the Halloween period at King Street. I've got some different reviewers from other podcasts who've said they'll come and talk about some of these films with us, so you'll hear less of my voice, which might be good for all of us. I'll still be here though. Don't forget, if you like what you hear, I do more of the same thing on ACM's Vault of Cult, which can also be found on Spotify and Anchor, where I talk about old movies basically and show them to people who haven't seen them before to see if they hold up to the fresh eye, so to speak. If you like what you heard, do come along to King Street, watch some of the movies, so many shown there. I spend a lot of my time there, and I spend a lot of my time watching films, too much probably, but it's great to talk about them with other people. Please follow the podcast on wherever you're listening. If you want to give it a rating, that actually helps get the word out for us, and maybe we get some more listeners and more people to chat about movies. We're going to end this one on just something I recorded a couple of months ago, actually, just coming out of watching First Blood. At the first of the VHS Fridays, caught up with Richard, who was along to see it, and we're just going to end on his thoughts on that film. Thank you very much. So, First Blood, just come out of the cinema. You hadn't seen it in the cinema before, no?
I have never seen that at the cinema, and that was absolutely amazing. It was a brilliant film.
Blown away. You watched it a lot on video, yeah?
I've seen it on video. I can't say that I've seen it a lot of times.
Okay.
So I went in there not really remembering too much about the story. I could obviously remember the basics of the story, and it was so good to sort of refresh my memory on that.
On the big screen. Yeah, do you come to King Street a lot?
I do, yeah. I normally come with my brother, and we see a lot of classic old movies, yeah.
Okay, so there's VHS Fridays, you're looking forward to that?
All of that sort of thing, yeah.
Excellent. Will you be at Gremlin Predator next month?
It's got to be done, hasn't it?
Excellent.
Absolutely. Excellent.
And just quick thoughts, Rambo franchise in general, are you a big fan, or is it just the first one?
I actually think they get better with each film.
Really?
Which is a very controversial thing to say.
Yeah. Have you seen the last one they done?
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. Okay. I know a lot of people didn't and thought it was a bit of a joke, but I thought it was absolutely fine. And I love the franchise. I think he's, the whole history of it, to me, it just got bigger and bigger and better and better.
Okay, so you like the action side of it?
I like the action side, but the weird thing is, if you noticed, he didn't actually kill a single person in the film. Accidentally, one person falls out of a helicopter, but he didn't actually kill one person in the film.
Right.
And people think, he sort of does all this mass slaughtering in the film, but he doesn't. There's no... there's just one person who fell out of a helicopter.
But in the later ones he does.
Absolutely. That's when it sort of goes a bit Star Wars, which makes a great story.
Excellent. Well, glad you enjoyed it. Good to see you. And another quick question. A couple of weeks, will you be seeing Tron?
I saw the promo tonight. Didn't realise it was on, and that looks really, really good. It's my sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah, Tron, 80s retro.
80s sort of retro films. A little bit tacky, maybe. My sort of thing.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Cheers.
No problem.